I want to bring up the first panel now, where indeed we will explore that thesis of how much or how little role the government had in fostering, again, not just K-pop, but also all of the cultural exports of Korea right now. So let me bring our first panel up to the stage. And then I will do some introductions, and then we will get into the session. Okay, so while our panelists are assembling, I will first introduce Eric Priest. Eric Priest researches in the area of intellectual property with a focus on copyright law in the information age and creative industry ecosystems in the US and China. He currently serves as the US-China IP Cooperation Dialogue, serves on that committee, organized by the US Chamber of Commerce and Renmin University in China. The Committee on US-China Relations named Professor Priest a 2014-2016 Public Intellectuals Program Fellow, and from 2006 to 2007, he was a Fellow in Residence at the Berkman Center for Internet and Society at Harvard Law School. Before entering the law field, he spent a decade as a music producer and songwriter with a couple of gold and platinum credits by obscure European artists. That was his own. Eric, you were too modest, far too modest. I regret that I had to read that. I would not say it that way, but that is his self-effacing bio. Since 1999, he has worked sporadically in the Chinese music industry as a consultant, web entrepreneur, songwriter, and producer. Most recently, he wrote and produced the theme song for the Chinese television drama Emotional Barcelona. His recent scholarship includes copyrighted free expression in China's film industry, acupressure, the emerging role of market ordering in global copyright enforcement, and copyright extremophiles, do creative industries thrive or just survive in China's high piracy environment? So he has a number of other publications as well. Over to the side of him is Sang-Jo Jung, who many of you may know because he has been in Korea here. He is a longtime professor at Seoul National University and was the dean there for a number of years. We actually met when he was coming over to Seattle with my former university and when I was coming over here. He has his PhD studies from the London School of Economics. Doctoral degree was awarded in 1991 for the thesis titled The Legal Protection of Computer Programs, with particular reference to UK, US, Japan, and Korea. His research and teaching is mostly around copyright, trademark, patent, unfair competition, antitrust, and internet. He taught Korean law at Harvard Law School in 2015, and at, again, my former school, University of Washington School of Law, and has also been at Georgetown University Law Center and at Duke Law School. As I mentioned, he was Dean of SNU's School of Law, civilian co-chairperson of the Presidential Council of Intellectual Property, president of Korea Game Law and Policy Society, and director of SNU's Center for Law and Technology. He has many other honors and has been published extensively. Next, over to his side, is Jesse Liu, who we met a number of years ago, I think at Berkeley. Is that right? Yes. And Jesse is, I consider him to just be a rising star of legal academics and intellectual property here in Asia. And he is now an assistant professor at National Chengchi University College of Communication. He has his Doctor of Juridical Science, his JSD from Cal Berkeley. He is eager to bring to the academic field his strong interest and experience in entertainment law and media governance. And I'm scanning his bio, but it doesn't mention your playing, your music playing. So I'm going to add it. He is also an accomplished guitar player and musician. So he is published extensively, and in some of his places he's been published are at Washington Journal of Law, Technology, and Arts, Chinese Entertainment Law Review, and Oxford Handbook of Music Law and Policy, a book that I'm the editor of. Was delighted to have him join that. And then we also have George Hwang. George, I'm looking for your bio here, which should be right on. But many of you probably know George, and I actually was remiss in not mentioning George at the beginning because, did you send us a bio, George?
I don't think so. Nobody asked.
So George actually helped us quite a bit in connecting me with many of the speakers here. Because he is extremely well connected across the region. And so I had met him at a number of events here, and so he was again extremely helpful in setting us up. I I'm not sure I have his biography, though.
I'll do that.
I'm so sorry, George. This is disrespecting you, and I do not mean to, but I have nowhere in here your bio. So I'm going to let you introduce yourself, and then if you want to start with your remarks, or do you want to start with Eric? Do you have an order that?
Wherever, you're the moderator.
Okay, introduce yourself, and then you can begin with your remarks.
Oh, okay. Right, my name is George Hwang. Besides, I'm a practicing lawyer now, but I used to be an academic, and I did teach copyright laws in the University of West Indies. And I've also been a music publisher in the 90s with Warner Music Publishing. Those were the days when you still had the 5 in music, now you only have 3. So without much ado, I will just talk a little bit about starting. So a lot of things that I would like to say has already been covered by the keynote speaker. But let me just say that when we talk about the role of government policy in the rise of K-pop, when I look at it, first of all, I think about policy. And when you think about policy, law and policy always comes together. However, policy is much wider. And when you think about law for media, we usually think about IP, copyright to be precise, and censorship laws. So that's been mentioned. But the policy part is wider, and it's more difficult when you talk about popular, making your work popular internationally. The policy is more important because it's very difficult to control. What can the Korean government be doing with regards to US laws? Yeah? So basically it's policy that we look at. And then I look at why is K-pop popular? When you look at this question, there's 2 issues to think about. Why is K-pop popular? And how did it get there? And only when we know the why and how did it get there, then where in this how has the Korean government come in? So this is where I've been looking. Now, why is K-pop popular? I think it seems to be saying that I put a few factors to it. One is the content itself. Then there's the technology part. And of course the marketing and the culture. So let's just look at the content. I think the content part, quality. Then we talk about all the trainings that you get. Some of them you get trained for many years. Quality, this quality bit, my age is showing because then I was thinking about Taiwan during its martial laws. And Taiwanese singers were very popular in Southeast Asia and Hong Kong as well in the 60s and 70s. And one of the reasons is that the singers actually have to go and get what is called a 歌星照, which is basically you have to get a professional singer's passport in order to get out of Taiwan to be a singer professionally. And I think these days it's very difficult to do that. We no longer have martial law. It's quite unacceptable. Taiwan's full of human rights these days. So the quality of it, of course, in Korea we'll think about training, the accessibility, not just technologically, it's accessible easier these days with all the Spotify and all, but I think this accessibility has to come with the localization. This is the how already. The localization and the collaboration that we see. I was just looking at the some statistics from The Economist, and it's published last year. It's quite interesting because it divided the world, and it's saying that English is becoming less important. And it's divided the world into 3 markets: the English, the Spanish, and others. Okay, and others would be all the smaller countries and Asian countries, and maybe that's why K-pop has, gained popularity first in Asia. But I also look at all the big hits now. They all seem to have English titles, some English words in it, and of course now they are actually singing in English. And localization also comes in the way they have been recruiting people. I see Thais, I see Chinese, I see Korean, New Zealanders, and all in K-pop. So that's the localization, that's the how. The technology bit, and I will leave that very much to later when people are talking about it. And of course the aesthetic quality. And I think Korean, most of the time, think about going international, and I think this internationalization came, correct me if I'm wrong, from the founder of SM and the whole idea of soft power. So it's not the Korean government, and when I look at it, it's very interesting that it doesn't come from the government first. It's really from the private industry. And of course, the government's role. I see all the, we will talk about it later, but where exactly does the government role come in? It's very few countries in the world have Presidential Council of Nation branding. It's quite, yes. And of course, your funds, the first one being in 2005, where 1 billion is being allotted. And of course, it's K-pop. The government's role only started, I believe, after the Asian economic crisis, because of diversification. That's some of the history, and I find it very, very fascinating in terms of the censorship laws when it comes from 1961 onwards, but I won't talk about that. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Here we go. Thanks so much for your comments. We're going to have each of the panelists give about 10 or so minutes of introductory comments and then do some discussion and then open it up for questions from the room. So I think we'll just keep moving over in the order you're sitting. So Jesse, how about give your next presentation? Yes, that's fine if you want to use the podium. Okay, and while we're setting that up, then when we get to the question and answer part for the room, we'll make sure that microphones are distributed when you ask questions. So we'll hand it to you, and please wait until you have the microphone because we are recording the proceedings. And so if you're asking your question without the microphone, both the panelists may not hear you enough, and also for people watching the video later will not be able to hear the question. Okay, so we'll have the slides come up and we'll turn it over to Jesse. Thanks.
I think you've got it, Chelsea.
Oh, I see. This is a vast away. Here we go.
Okay. Hello. Okay, so nice to see you all today. Yeah, actually, I came from Taiwan, so today I would like to present a topic about the music in Mandarin market, because I just finished an article, in Professor O'Connor's book, Oxford Handbook of Music Law and Policy. So, okay. Yeah, I just want to start from a very important case in Taiwan. Basically, I think maybe some of you read this book. This is a very famous book about music, about the copyright system in China. The Harvard Law Professor William Elfer, he wrote a book called Stealing a Book is an Elegant Offense, IP Law in Chinese Civilization. I think this is a very good book because he tried to say there are so many factors in the Mandarin market, how to protect the copyright, because there are several different kind of factors. But he thinks the internal and external incentives are very important. And actually in this book, he mentioned Taiwan is a very special example because Taiwan just have that kind of internal incentive try to threaten the copyright law system. So it's some kind of role model in the Mandarin music market. Okay, so actually, this case, Sleeping Beauty, is a very leading case in Taiwan. In 2012, a very famous, talented, and creative artist called Lai Youshi, she wrote a song called Sleeping Beauty. And a rising star at that time, Wang Xinglu, caused some kind of copyright infringement. So Lai Youshi filed a lawsuit to the court. But this case is very interesting because actually the judge can find a striking similarity. But I think 12 years ago, everything is very different. The technology was not so advanced. So it's pretty hard to prove Wang Xinglu have the evidence of assets in this case. So actually in the district court, that's why the judicial decision say there's no copyright infringement in this case. But I think this is a very interesting case because actually the attorney tried to send this case into the Taiwan's constitutional court. Yeah, I think this is some kind of very good introduction for Professor O'Connor as well because he will visit Taiwan pretty soon. Yeah, now we have a justice in the Taiwanese constitutional court focusing on IP law. Yeah, so actually in this case, while the attorney tried to send this, actually the judge, sorry, I'm wrong. The judge tried to stop the case and tried to file a lawsuit in Taiwan constitutional court. And he said Taiwan has very strong, criminal sense penalization. Yeah, and this is not good for the rising star. Because for the rising star, it's very important they need the reputation, try to stay in the market. So they think there's some kind of human right issue inside. Okay, so why I try to mention this case because you can see that actually in Taiwan we have very strong criminal responsibility, especially on copyright infringement. So there are some kind of just like Professor Alfred say, in Taiwan we got some kind of external pressure from the international treaties because the Western power tried to put more responsibility in Taiwan. Especially in Taiwan in the past, we are so-called piracy kingdom, in Asia. But now we just have that kind of internal incentive. But my issue here is actually Taiwan, we are trying to set a pretty high standard. I think in China they also try to set a pretty high standard actually in the physical legal system. But is it good or is it not? I think this is a question we need to think about. And I think, just like I said, Taiwan is a very good model. For example, Zhou and Teresa Deng are very famous singers in Mandarin market. So I think they are very good examples. So Taiwan, maybe we need to make some kind of adjustments about our legal system. Okay. And this, just like I say, in Taiwan we try to fit the standard WTO, the TRIPS, and Berne Convention, so we set a pretty high standard, try to deter the copyright infringement. But I don't think this is very good for our artists in the market because they are pretty easy to get copyright infringement. And if you don't get a license, it takes a lot of risk to finish your musical compositions. Okay. And that's another issue, maybe it's about policy, because in Taiwan, actually the artists don't file civil law cases. They always file criminal cases because you can save the litigation fee. The prosecutor will help you try to file a lawsuit, try to collect evidence. I think this is a very serious problem in Taiwan, I think. Everyone just filed criminal cases in Taiwan, especially for the copyright infringements. And also, I think this is a very interesting situation in Taiwan because I know, actually, some of you might know there's some very famous cases in the US, Marvin Gaye case and Led Zeppelin case. It's very important to try to distinguish what is musical notation and what is recorded composition. Maybe you can say sound recording. But in Taiwan, the judge didn't know this. I don't think the officer in the government didn't really know this kind of distinction. I think this is a very big problem for us as well, because you need to know what is the real musical production. I think this is very important. So actually in the Sleeping Beauty case, the judge didn't try to make a distinction. So I think this is this is a also very tough question for you. So I think now, in the past, the composer always try to sit down and try to stay at your home and try to use paper and pencil, try to write down the notation. Yeah, this is some kind of traditional way to do musical composition. But now it's totally different. You might know Tim Pan Alley. Gershwin is a very famous songwriter. He always, you know, he depend on this kind of way to do the musical composition. But can you help me to next page? Okay. So yeah, next page. Thank you. Yeah. So, but now I think besides of the distinction of sound recording and musical composition, I think the technology is also a very important thing. In Taiwan, in China, we have so many music studios. So now the young generation, you don't need to stay at home, use paper and pencil to write down everything, to do the professional musical notations. You just need to go into the music studio. The professional engineer will try to help you. The session player will try to help you. So how to produce the music is totally different. And Taiwan, I think we catch up this kind of trend, but the legal system didn't change a lot. So I think that's why the policies will be very important for Taiwan. We need to make some kind of adjustments. Yeah, okay. The next page. Okay, so yeah, actually I studied in Berkeley. There are some very famous studios like Fantasy Studio, and in Taiwan, next page, yeah, we also have several very famous studios like Mega and Rock Music Studio there. Yeah, so we depend on the technology to do music. Yes. And the last point I would like to mention is about the relationship between judges, juries, and experts. In Taiwan, we don't have the jury system, but in the Sleeping Beauty case, the judge tried to invite two professors from the music schools to provide their expert opinions. But they didn't know how to do that. They even didn't know how to distinguish the sound recording and musical composition. Yeah, so that's a very big problem for us. So I think we should learn from the US, because in the Marvin Gaye and Led Zeppelin case, they set some very good standard how to invite an expert. I know there are some things still we need to work on, but I think we should learn from this kind of system. Okay, and okay, next one. Next one. Okay, yeah, you might know the Judith Vinell. Yeah, it's some kind of leading expert in the US. Taiwan, I think we should maintain some kind of diversity, because it seems in Taiwan's copyright infringement, we always invite the similar, I mean just maybe only two experts to join the case, try to provide the expert opinions. I think these some kind of drawbacks we should try to avoid from. Okay. Yeah, there's some kind of, and I think the amicus brief system is also some kind of system we should learn from, because you know in Taiwan the judge just passed the bar exam, they graduate from law school, they don't have any musical background, so it's pretty hard for them try to make any decision about professional music production. So I think amicus brief system can be a very important basis. They can get more information. I mean, the judges or maybe the government in the future, they try to set up more law. We should open this kind of channel to get more information. Okay. So, yeah, keep going. Thank you. Keep going. Okay, and I think database is very important. I think today we will mention about some cases, or maybe some example like this. I think how to build a sufficient database is very important, because in Taiwan we have several cases the judge need to figure out who is the copyright owner. Because in Taiwan, so many international companies, for example, Universal and Sony Music went into Taiwan's market. They try to merge some independent companies. I think that's a good thing. We try to build more professional environment. But the database, we lost a lot of data, a lot of information about who is the copyright owner. So I think this is also a very serious problem in Taiwan. Yeah, just like I said, Chien-Chih is the first one to enter the Chinese market from Taiwan. Yeah, he has a very famous song called 大约在冬季. It's about in winter. People didn't know who is the original owner because Chien-Chih filed a lawsuit in Taiwan's courts. The judges just found no one knows who is the original owner. So this is a very serious problem actually. Especially in this case, the collecting society also didn't know who is the original owner because we just found the information is totally wrong. So this is some kind of mistake happened in the globalization in Taiwan, I think. Okay. So this is a collecting society's website in Taiwan. You can see they always try to post something about which company, which bookstore or restaurant try to apologize for their copyright infringements. So I think the collecting society should more focusing on the licensing, not just about the criminal cases. But this is a very serious problem you can see in Taiwan, even in the collecting society's website. Okay. So the last point, keep going. Yeah, this is some kind of music notation I made in Berkeley because I had a jazz band in Berkeley. Musical notation can be different kind of style. I mean, in that class, the teacher teaches us to use the color, to use the line, to use the spot to do the notation. So I think, in Taiwan, we still have a long way to go. But in my presentation, I just try to introduce the real situation in Taiwan. And I really hope I can learn more from today's presentation. So thank you so much. It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Professor Liu. Thanks for the presentation. Now I'd like to turn it over to Dean Jong. Dean Jong has some slides as well. I'll mention also that Serona Elton, who is here, is also with the Mechanical Licensing Collective. So as we're speaking about collecting societies, then we will try to address some of that on some of the panels upcoming. It is a core part of how then we try to then compensate and reward the composers and the performers to make sure through the various collecting societies that they can get paid for what they've produced. Dean Jong.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Okay, thank you for inviting me to seminar. I'm honored to share with you exciting stories, fascinating stories about K-pop. To be honest, I can't sing a song, not a single pop song. So I guess I'm not qualified to talk about K-pop. When I was young, my grandpa always said to me, if you like to sing, you will suffer as poor when you grow up, or live like a gangster for the rest of your life. My grandpa actually banned singing in the house. That's why I grew up totally tone deaf or a terrible singer. To console myself, I'm a victim of Korean Confucian education in the 60s and 70s. Hwang is a cousin of mine. When he was young, he was a good boy in front of Grandpa. But once he entered his room, he ignored Grandpa's teaching and was immersed in music by putting on headphones, listening to pop music, and playing on the electric piano in his room. 40 years later, Hwang became the father of BTS. My daughter loves Hwang more than her daddy, Watching my cousin practicing music secretly in his room, now a leader in the music industry, I feel like I am witnessing dramatic changes in Korea with my own eyes. Dramatic changes for the past 50 years from a Confucian society to democratic and industrialized society. This morning, I'd like to tell you such dramatic changes in our society and the music industry of Korea are due to substantial changes in the relevant laws and policies. Now, let me begin with Korean drama, My Love from the Start. The drama was popular not only in Korea, but also in China as well. On a Chinese platform, Ichi, the drama was streamed more than 2 billion times for 3 months in 2014. One day, Chinese officials, Communist Party officials, debated why China couldn't make a drama as good as My Love from the Start. Their conclusion was creativity was impossible due to the rigorous censoring procedure in China. Exactly the same debate happened in Korea more than 30 years ago. In 1986, the Western American government and Western industry pushed Korea to get rid of the screen quota on foreign films. Just a few years after the screen quota disappeared, Hollywood films took over more than 80% of the Korean market. Then, Korean government began to invest in entertainment industry, including films and music, in the 1980s. Investment of $1 billion didn't make any success either in film or in music. Eventually, you realized that without freedom of expression, creativity cannot be achieved with money alone. Artists complained about the censorship by Korea Public Performance Ethics Committee under the previous Films Act and Music Record Act. For example, a song like Long Legs Mr. Kim was banned for mocking the then president's short stature. And a song like Our Republic Korea was heard to contain a message of resistance to the authoritarian government, and the committee ordered the lyrics to be modified. Thanks to the democratization, artists were able to bring a petition to the Constitutional Court of Korea to review the constitutionality of relevant statutes. In 1996, the Constitutional Court of Korea made several decisions to the effect that de facto censorship through prior deliberation by the committee was unconstitutional and invalid. Once controversial censorship was gone and freedom of expression was achieved, Korean artists were able to make excellent films and songs. Now, we are free to make a drama like Squid Game, even if it contains some elements of violence. We can sing a song like Gangnam Style, even if it is somewhat sexy and vulgar. Those violent, sexy, or vulgar elements were impossible to express under the previous regime 3 decades ago. The success of K-pop wasn't achieved solely through democratization and freedom of expression. Without Korea's industrialization, it would have been difficult to expect the success of K-pop. During the course of industrialization, the copyright of Korea was revised in order to strengthen copyright protection. Additionally, with industrialization, Korea's digital platforms have also developed fast enough to make artists to be able to meet tens of million fans regardless of their nationality. I will skip the story about Japanese manga and anka. Once it was known to the domestic industry that copyright makes money, there were an increasing number of artists and entrepreneurs who were willing to put in their own effort and money to create wonderful content. This is why webtoons have become popular not only in Korea but also in Japan and in the United States as well. For the same reason, BTS and Blackpink are gaining worldwide popularity. Now, K-pop appears frequently in the global top 10 albums, as you see. What made K-pop so successful? My answer is that is because of copyright policy and digital platforms. Let me show you one example. In 2014, Gangnam Style was the most watched video with more than 2 billion views. Gangnam Style might not have attracted the attention of established distributors like Universal Music or Warner Music, but it attracted a huge fan following on the then new digital platform like YouTube 10 years ago. Gangnam Style is totally crazy and awesome with its horse dancing. Korea is one of the most wired countries with networks, internet in the world. Korean artists and entrepreneurs are good at YouTube. In case of Gangnam Style, YouTube video was not simply good, but encouraging viewers to make their own imitations, their own parodies, and upload them back on YouTube. In a few months, users uploaded more than 1 million parodies of Gangnam Style, which then led to more views of original Gangnam Style. This is not the end of the story, but the beginning of copyright issues arising on digital platforms. Artists, digital platforms, consumers all have to deal with copyright infringements on digital platforms. Lens versus Universal was just one of the examples on disputes arising over user-generated content or parodies. Quite similar disputes and litigations happen in Korea as well. Music depends on copyright. Artists and the music industry will have to think seriously about what is better, strict enforcement of copyright or a consumer-friendly approach. There are a number of digital platforms where artists meet their fans no matter which country they come from. Accordingly, contractual relationships between platforms and artists turn out to be increasingly important in 21st century. In Korea, artists are created, trained, and thoroughly managed by entertainment agencies such as HYBE, SM Entertainment, and so on. Not only idols, star singers, but also composers, dancers, and performers all depend on entertainment agencies. That is why contracts between artists and agencies are increasingly important in Korea. Surely in these contracts, copyright is the most important issue. With rapid development of the entertainment industry, copyright has an increasingly greater impact on all stakeholders in Korea. Not only digital platforms, entertainment agencies, but also artists, record labels, performance rights organizations, copyright collection societies, and consumers all have conflicting interests in the emerging music industry in Korea. In Korea, some of idols, some of artists are subject to exclusive contracts which are criticized as unfair, so unfair that they are called as slave contracts. Some students or some young fans in Korea face serious threats of criminal punishment as well as civil liability for sharing songs, as was the case in Taiwan. To ensure the continued growth of K-pop, it is time for Korea to figure out what laws and policies are more efficient and fair and reasonable at the same time to encourage creativity in Korea. Now, I look forward to your advice and comments. Thank you.
Thanks so much, John. Excellent comments and great background, really understanding. Now I'd like to turn it over to Professor Priest.
Excellent.
Slide up. Slide up.
Got it. Thank you. Hello everyone. I want to start by just thanking Sean and Mason Korea for inviting me, but also, more importantly, for hosting this forum, because I think it's very important to have these kinds of forums where academics and industry get together and have these sorts of interchanges. In my field, which is intellectual property, what you find is that scholars can be very influential on policy making, because they're called to testify in front of their legislative bodies, that sort of thing, about copyright policy, about cultural policy. Oftentimes have no idea how music is created and what happens in the music industry. They just have this kind of ivory tower conception of what they think happens, and then they base these theories about what the policy should be based on these uninformed conceptions. So I think this kind of academic and industry exchange is extremely important, not just for us academics to better understand what's happening, to better study and research it, but also for industry. So thanks for this information exchange. I guess I want to start up by, well, first of all, my background is in U.S. Music industry, U.S. intellectual property law, and Chinese music industry and Chinese intellectual property law. And so I'm going to talk a bit about the rise of C-pop or Mando-Pop. And I'm going to start with some comments that have already been made by Dean Motz and Professor Lee and George Hwang, talking about the importance of the culture industries and music to Korean state soft power. China, you may be aware, is very, very focused. The Chinese government is very focused on the concept of soft power. It's very important to the Chinese government to be viewed as a growing, not just economic and military power, but also cultural power. And so many in China sort of look at what has happened in Korea and have salivated over the, the cultural soft power achievements that Korea's made through K-pop and through its other highly successful, not just regional but global cultural exports in the fields of, film, television, and of course music and K-pop. And there were articles written at the time of Psy's success with Gangnam Style in China, sort of state newspapers asking, where's our Psy? Where's our Gangnam Style? Why can't we create it? That's a complex question, and one that maybe we will have time to get into on the panel, but maybe we can talk about throughout the day. Interestingly, China has had a tremendously successful decade in its music industry, but primarily domestic, not global. So this, sort of soft power goal for the Chinese music industry and the Chinese government is still, is still something they're trying to reach, trying to attain. But domestically, they've had a banner decade. So when I was writing about the Chinese music industry a decade ago, basically it was the 20th ranked market in the world and had just 92 million, according to the IFPI, which is kind of the Global Record Industry Association. They reported about $92 million in revenue at the time. Today, China has jumped over that decade from being the 20th ranked to the 5th ranked music market in the world. And I was looking for figures, the latest figures. It looks like it's around, there are different figures floating around out there, but it looks like it's around 3 billion in revenue from digital music, which is the whole recorded music market. Nobody's selling CDs or LPs in any meaningful way in China. So we're talking about something like a 30-fold increase over a decade. And that's an incredible story. And there are a lot of reasons behind it. And I've written about some, and I don't have time in this short introduction to really get into all of those reasons. But I want to talk a little bit about it. So we can ask, again, this panel is about, what has the government done to facilitate the growth of these industries, and again, I'm focusing on C-pop or Mando-Pop. So what has the government done to facilitate this tremendous turnaround? Well, for starters, there's been very little in the way of cultural policy aimed at promoting the rise of Mando-Pop or C-pop. Interestingly, there are lots of kind of state-issued plans, intellectual property plans, and sort of 5-year plans about technological growth and kind of economic growth that have cited the cultural industries, but it seems almost like lip service. There isn't that much substance behind these plans. Just sort of recognize that, hey, cultural policy, that's one way of achieving some important growth. There have been, so I would say the government intervention that has mattered has been in the way of copyright law amendments and market regulation to address monopolistic behavior by music streaming platforms. So those are really the ways the government has got involved, is kind of, copyright regulations like we've heard about in Korea and Taiwan, updating, modernizing, enhancing the copyright law, and then also, and I'll talk about this a bit, market regulation and the kind of anti-monopoly regulation aimed at the platform side. So with regard to copyright laws and regulations, we've seen kind of, China has, over the past 2 decades, really modernized its copyright law, brought it up to international standards. That's very important. But there are still a number of issues and penalties, although they've been incrementally increased a number of times over the years. Penalties for infringement still remain pretty low as a deterrent. There have been cultural programs, cultural promotion programs, but often these focus on kind of traditional Chinese music, not really on forward-looking, developing new industries. There have been attempts, like we've heard about, like in Korea, to try to create incubators or invest in companies that are involved in production, or kind of invest in regions, try to create like a music center in a city, that sort of thing. Those haven't been especially useful. And then there has been enforcement. The government has engaged in what's called the SwordNet anti-piracy campaign, and that has really been kind of ballyhooed as the big reason why suddenly the music industry really took off. I don't think that that's actually the reason. It probably had some effect, but it certainly wasn't the panacea that people seem to make it out to be. In fact, what really happened in China on the enforcement side was that the various players, the online platforms, started cleaning up their own catalogs and their own content base because major advertisers put pressure on them to do that. And that really started on the video side. It came to the music side later. And that started all the way back in 2009. We didn't see it sort of kind of hit the music side until after 2015. So sort of more self-enforcement than government campaigns, which are notoriously not very effective in China. And then there's anti-monopoly action, and that came from a very unique aspect of licensing music in China, which is that, and again, this started from the video side. So video, basically what happened was when video websites said, hey, we need to police the content on our site. We need to police it for pirated content and purge pirated content because Coca-Cola and McDonald's and KFC won't advertise with us anymore if we have pirated content. Then they said, well, if we're going to pay for content, we might as well get exclusive licenses, because why should we pay all this money and have the same content that our competitor has? And so that actually created this incredible bubble for exclusive licenses in the video platform space. And that then became the norm for licensing in China, and that kind of just bled over into the music licensing space. So what you had was companies like Tencent going to the major record companies and in regional record companies, domestic record companies, and saying, hey, we'll license your content. In fact, we'll pay you more than you've ever earned in China, but we want exclusive licenses. Oh, and by the way, we will definitely become your agent, and we're going to sub-license out then to our competitors. Well, guess what? They got the exclusive licenses, and then they turned around and their competitors said, hey, we need sub-licenses so that we, right, as a competing distribution platform, have content that users want. And from my own personal speaking with these competitors like NetEase, which is a competitor of Tencent, which is China's biggest music streaming platform. NetEase, this competitor, they basically said, Tencent is, they have a conflict of interest. They're our competitor, and they are supposed to be the agent of the copyright owners and sub-license to us, and they're asking for it's essentially extortionate pricing, and so the market regulators stepped in, and they said, you're going to have to unwind, Tencent, you're going to have to unwind all these exclusive licensing deals, and you are going to have to then only license on a non-exclusive basis, at least when you're getting catalog-wide licenses. Maybe for individual licenses with artists, you can still do them exclusively, and that's becoming a thing now. But for catalog licenses, you're going to have to do them non-exclusively, and that has certainly helped expand the market for streaming music in China. And by the way, the National Copyright Administration then stepped in and said, essentially, not just the previous exclusive licenses need to be unwound, but we're essentially making it illegal to sign exclusive licenses, catalog-wide licenses going forward. So that's what the state has done, and there are some important actions there, but the state could do a lot more. And so I just want to say a few things. I actually wrote a paper about this not too long ago. It's called The Chinese Copyright Dream, sort of tapping into the slogan of Xi Jinping, the president of China, the Chinese dream, right? That's kind of a guiding slogan in China. So we were thinking, my co-author and I on that paper were thinking, what would an ideal copyright system maybe look like in China? Or, you know, it's not for us to say, but what are some potential options that policymakers could look at? And one of the key ones I would say is that the Chinese music industry is still very much held back by the fact that licensing, the whole concept of licensing and how licensing works is still very rudimentary in China. So, you know, the government has stepped in and done enforcement, but enforcement, that's not a value add. You don't, as a copyright owner, make money by suing somebody. You usually lose money, right? But you don't make money by suing and enforcing your copyrights. You make it by licensing the right and being able to partake in the upside of that work, right? If that work does really well, you share in that upside. Well, traditionally, that kind of licensing has not been the norm in China. Traditionally, there are just sort of buyout licenses in China, or upfront payments, and the kind of ongoing sort of, you know, royalty payments, that sort of, you know, again, kind of sharing in the upside is traditionally not the case. In fact, when I was working in the music industry in China, I was talking to a label about doing a kind of, you know, revenue sharing licensing deal for some production work I was doing with an artist, and one of my friends at the label took me aside and said, look, you don't want to do that because you will never see that money. Take the upfront money, believe me, that's what you want. And that's a problem long-term in China. This idea of, in Mandarin, it's called mai duan, which means you basically, mai duan, you sell it outright. You sell the copyright outright. And then you don't, as the copyright owner or the creator, you don't take part in the upside. This is something that the state actually, there are, especially now with technology, the state could get involved in creating technological infrastructure that would create a functional, even thriving licensing system. But without that kind of infrastructure and a business culture to support a sophisticated licensing ecosystem, then in a market like China, copyright owners are always going to under-realize the value of their works, regardless of how well enforced copyright is. I guess the last point I want to make about the potential for the growth of the Chinese music industry, and tying in again to this idea about soft power and sort of what's necessary for the music industry to become a vehicle of soft power for Chinese policymakers, is related to something that Professor Zhang just said a few moments ago. You know, as in his story about the rise of K-pop, arguably the key government involvement was actually non-involvement, right? Staying out of the way and allowing artistic freedom of expression, right? Removing censorship. And what this does is it helps the artist creating in that system to have authenticity. Music, connecting with audiences, is all about credibility, right? And when you're creating under a system, an authoritarian system, where all the works are heavily censored, it's very difficult for global audiences to believe in those works, right? They might be concerned that in fact that artist is just, as the Chinese say, the hosha of that means the mouthpiece of the Chinese government. And so if China views music as an important cultural export for soft power purposes, then it's going to be very difficult to realize those aims until censorship is greatly reduced in that space.
All right, thanks, Professor Priest. Excellent. Now, I'd like to see, we have some time left, and I have some questions I can direct to the panelists, but I want to see if anyone in the room has questions before I ask mine, because time is so much short. Anyone have, and if you do not be bashful. I'm actually sure if this, can anyone hear me? Yeah, it seems to go on. Yes, question. Wait for the microphone, please.
Hello, my name is Mike Choi. I'm from Kakao Entertainment. And I have a question for Jesse. So that was a good presentation on the protection of copyright in Taiwan. But I had a question about protection of foreign copyrights in Taiwan, because there's actually a case on point involving K-pop in the early 2000s involving Will Pan, a fairly prominent star in Taiwan. So it has the, so correct me if I'm mistaken, but the Taiwanese courts didn't recognize the copyright for the Korean artist that composed the song. So I was wondering, it's been almost 20 years since then, so I was wondering if that kind of issue has been resolved, so like protection is afforded for foreign copyrights.
Actually, I'm quite curious what kind of specific issue you would like to have about the foreign copyright. Yeah, but I think in terms of collecting society, yeah, I think the licensing system is very important. Yeah, especially for Taiwan, because now it seems the collecting society try to file a lot of lawsuits. They even hire the student, try to go to many bookstores and restaurants, try to do some investigation, try to, when they heard some song, they, public maybe performance in some place, they didn't get a license, they will try to, report to the collecting society and file a lot of lawsuits. And I think another question, I just try to respond to Professor Priest's, talks. I think in Taiwan, in China, I know the collecting society doesn't allow the artists to do the self-licensing. I think this is incorrect, because the reason in Taiwan is about the government try to enhance the efficiency, try to support the collecting society, because the collecting society always say we cannot earn a lot of money, a lot of administrative expense. So, but I know in the US this is totally incorrect. Yeah, we should let the artists have more autonomy and more flexibility, try to do the licensing by themselves. Because when they seek for some very good opportunities, they should have that kind of right to do what they want. Yeah, and coming back to the issue about foreign copyright, I think Taiwan has very strong connection with K-pop, I think. Honestly, I have to say all my students listen to the K-pop. They don't listen to Mandarin pop pretty much now. Yeah, they live in a different kind of environment. So I think how to build some kind of international connection between the collecting society is also a very good, good point, a very important point for us. Because I know there are some kind of conferences the collecting society will join and they will try to communicate with each other. I think this kind of event should be very important for them. And yeah, because sometimes we didn't know how to connect collect the copyright revenue from foreign countries. But I think Taiwan has a very strong market for K-pop. So I think we still a lot of work to do. Yeah, thank you. I hope I answered your question. I tried. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
We have time for one more question. We're almost out of time. Anyone else in the room? Again, I have some other questions. I want to make sure people have a chance in the room. Seeing none, then, I think what I will do really is this idea of censorship. Again, Professor Jong bringing it up as something that was key for the expression. So I'd actually go back to George Hwang. What do you think about across the Asian region? What is the status of censorship? And so think about Singapore, and perhaps Jesse could weigh in on Taiwan. Is there this kind of ability for freedom of expression, and does that actually play the key role in allowing this kind of export of cultural self-power, soft power?
I was hoping that you would ask something about copyright. It would be easier. Just let me supplement with some facts and figures. I was just, I can't access my internet here. Anyway, in terms of just sort of soft power for K-pop, Dynamite, I think it earned more than about 250 billion won, but for overall like cosmetic industry and all, it helped. All the cosmetic industry and other industry earn like 650 billion. What do I think about censorship? I think it's overall in Asia, it is getting more and more difficult for the government to control and censor simply because of the internet and Netflix and all. So it's getting more and more difficult. And also, when you talk about censorship, you have to divide into whether you are able to make it and whether you are able to receive and watch it. Most of the time in the old days, the censorship is they won't allow you to make it, and it's quite easy to censor it in terms of receipt. By the way, I think under the Broadcasting Act in Singapore, you still need a license to have a satellite dish, which of course it's so passé these days. Who wants that? Right. So honestly, it's very difficult because the whole idea of censorship is to a certain extent mold and a certain form of social engineering, and that is difficult now. I think any government is trying to do it, except maybe in the area of politics and that I'm thinking about Hong Kong right now. Yes. Go ahead. I want to listen to about Hong Kong and censorship.
Not so much censorship in Hong Kong, but I wanted to share just two examples. Right here in Korea, we're facing a censorship issue. With videos, we have to submit it for approval before we can put it, right? And it's available from the States coming in, through YouTube. So I think Professor Sang Jo-jong will know. Right now there is a bill, and we're very grateful for it, that will remove this censorship requirement in Korea. In China, for digital, music, we do what we call, we're tasked with doing what we call self-censorship. So for certain things, for example, if your video starts with a youth throwing Molotov cocktails, out of abundance of caution, we don't release that in China, because obviously it's not a good social message. But when it comes to the physical, so right now there is a small resurgence in physical products, particularly vinyl. It has been quite tough for us to get our approvals to release vinyl recordings, when it is actually available digitally. So, there is that disconnect that still exists. But we do see governments, in Korea here, they recognize it after some lobbying, they will change. Hong Kong, despite all the issues, actually you're free to release whatever you want to release, so no controls over whatever you want to release online.
That's if you talk about C, I suppose.
Yes, and Indonesia, there are controls, Malaysia, again, the worry is, it seems to be a little bit more extreme now, so but I just wanted to share, that from the industry perspective, it's always a worry.
Thanks so much. We look forward to your comments on one of the upcoming panels. This is one of our other speakers who will be joining us. I think we're out of time now, and I don't want to cut into the break too much. So we will have, a 10, 11-minute break now until we resume programming at 11 o'clock. But please thank me in thanking our wonderful speakers. All right, now we'll be convened until 11 o'clock. See you shortly.
What is Taiwan's strategy? Because obviously when you talk about copyright for international, you want money because you get Taiwan's not a country. Sorry. Yeah. So you cannot be signing a lot of this like you cannot be signing a lot of PCT and all. So I think
뭐 끊어야 되나? 세션별로
go to a different location and I'd like to look at their conversations.
I was worried.
They went China, they see the judges of the
Yes.
我是歌手，
我是歌手吗？还是歌手还是那个会转
The Voice，
那个会转
对，
那个现在已经看掉了，太多那个，因为这个谁，因为这个可可。